Welcome to Function Focused Lesson 22 with Ms. Barrett. Let's start by going over the Lesson 21 practice answers. So in Lesson 21, we discussed the sum of finite arithmetic sequences. So we already know how to find out if a sequence is arithmetic, okay? We already learned how to find a specific number or term in a sequence. Now we're learning how to, or last class we learned how to add up a specific amount of terms in a sequence. So that's what we talked about last, or arithmetic sequence. That's what we talked about last class. So here are the answers to that practice. Hopefully you guys got a chance to do it. I wanted to zoom in on just maybe one or two of them, just to remind you of the process. So it says find the sum of the first 8 terms. So S sub 8 means to find the sum of the first 8 terms of the sequence. So I gave you 3 sequences, and let's look at the first and second sequence. So here we have a sequence 1, 5, 9, and 13. So your first step is always and forever, no matter what kind of sequence I give you, is to define either the common difference or the common ratio. Here, because it's arithmetic, and I tell you it's arithmetic, we know that it's going to be a common difference. So we have to do our test to find our D, or our common difference. So you take the second term, subtract the first term. So 5 minus 1 equals 4. Then you take the third term and subtract the second term. 9 minus 5 equals 4. Because these numbers are the same, we know our common difference is 4. Okay, that means I'm adding by 4 each time. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 plus 4 is 9. 9 plus 4 is 13. Okay, now because it's arithmetic, in order for us to find the sum, S sub 8, we have to first find the 8th term of the sequence. So for arithmetic, it's just one extra step. If you want to find the sum of the first 8 numbers in a sequence, you first have to find the 8th term. Okay, so we have to, use our explicit formula. A sub n equals A sub 1 plus the common difference times n minus 1. Okay, and we know this information. So you can already know, we just did our test to find the common difference. Now we know our n is 8 because we want to find the sum of the first 8 terms. That means we have to find A sub 8, which is the 8th term. So that's where you get your n from. What am I asking you to find the sum of? What am I asking you to find the sum of the first 8? So therefore 8 is n. Our first term is easy. Just look at the sequence and it's 1. And the term that we have to find in order to find the sum is A sub 8. So we can plug in everything we know. We know A sub 8 is what we're looking for, equals the first term, which is 1, plus the common difference, which is 4, times n, which is 8 minus 1. Everything in orange is what I plugged in, what I knew. I also could have made A sub 8 orange, but I just didn't. Okay, now distribute. So plug in everything you know all at once, guys. Distribute that 4 to the 8 and that 4 to the 1. So it becomes 1 plus 4 times 8 is 32, and then 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Add all these up. 1 plus 32 is 33, minus 4 is 29. So the 8th term in this sequence is 29. Now that we know A sub 8, we can plug that into our sum formula. Our sum formula says S sub n equals n divided by 2 times A sub 1, or the first term, plus the term that you needed to find the sum of the first 8, which was A sub 8. So it becomes S sub 8, equals 8, which was our n. We knew that from up here. 8 divided by 2 times the first term, which was 1, plus A sub 8, which was, or the 8th term in the sequence, which was 29. And we found that here. Okay. Now we just do our order of operations. Parentheses first, so 1 plus 29 is 30. Then we can do our multiplication or division first here, because 8 divided by 2 is 4, and then multiply. So the sum of the first 8 terms in this sequence is 120. If I add all the first 8 up, it would add up to 120. I did the same thing here for number 2. I just did it without the table. I did my test to find my common difference, which was 2. Okay. Since we're trying to find the sum of the first 8 terms, I need to find the 8th term because it's an arithmetic sequence. So I used my explicit formula. I plugged in what I knew. I know D is 2, N is 8, A sub 1, or the first term, is -2, and A sub 8 is what I'm looking for. Plugged in what I know, -2 plus 2 times 8 minus 1. Okay. Distributed that 2. 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times -1 is -2. Added that all up, I got A sub 8, or the 8th term in this sequence, is 12. Now I can plug in everything I know, including my A sub 8, into my sum formula. So it becomes S sub 8 equals 8 divided by 2, which was N divided by 2, times the first term, which is -2, plus A sub 8. Okay. Did my order of operations, which was my parentheses first, which was 10. -2 plus 12 is 10. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay. And then 4 times 10 is 40. So if I added up the first 8 terms of this sequence, it would add up to 40. Now, guys, I want you to remind you that if I've asked you to find S sub 100, the sum of the first 100 terms, if it's arithmetic, you have to find A sub 100. So whatever this N is, you have to find the term that's in that sequence using the explicit formula if it's an arithmetic sequence. Okay. All right. Now, today we're going to discuss the sum of geometric sequences. Lesson 22 is about the sum of geometric sequences. Now, this is the equation. The formula looks a little bit more complex, but the process is a little bit more simple. So looking here at the sum of geometric sequence. So again, this is the sum of a specific amount of terms. So the sum is for S, and N represents the number of terms. So N is the number of terms, just like with arithmetic. A sub 1 is the first term. And R, as we know from our previous discussion of geometric sequences, is the common ratio. Or what are we multiplying by each time? Okay, so this is the formula for the sum. The sum of a specific amount of terms in a sequence equals the first term times 1 minus the common ratio raised to the power of n divided by 1 minus the common ratio. Okay, this is going to require us, especially this part, is going to require us to really hone in on our skills for order of operations. Okay, so I asked you to find the sum of the first 8 terms in each sequence. So I'm asking you to find the sum of the first 8 terms in each sequence. Okay, first thing we have to do, remember, you have to test. We know it is a geometric sequence because I tell you that, but we need to know what our common ratio is. So the first thing you do is a test. Now, if you can look at this and say, hey, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, then you can already know that your R here is going to be 2, because we're multiplying by 2 each time. But for the sake of just checking and making sure you're accurate, do your test. So here we have, take the second term and divide it by the first term. A sub 2 divided by A sub 1 is 4 divided by 2 equals 2. And then take your third term and divide it by your second term, and you get 8 divided by 4, which is also 2. Because that is 2 is our, the number 2 is the same, then we know our common ratio is 2. Our first term is also 2. And our N is what we're trying to find, which is 8. We're trying to find the sum of the first 8. Therefore, N is 8. Okay. So now, we know these things. 8, 2, 2. Now we can plug that straight into our sum formula. We do not have to find a sub 8 just like in the arithmetic. That's why I said geometric is a little bit more simpler. All we have to do now is plug what we know, which is n, a sub 1, and r, into our formula. Okay, so then now it's a s sub 8, because we're trying to find the sum of the first 8 terms, equals the first term, which is 2, times 1 minus 2, which is r, raised to the n power. So it's 2 raised to the n power. So it's 2 raised to the 8th power, divided by 1 minus 2. So I'm going to put in what I plugged in is what I know, which is in orange. Okay, so all I plugged in was a sub 1, r I had to plug in twice, and then n. Now we have to use our order of operations, our PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, to simplify this. So first thing you have to do is P, which is parentheses. Okay, so we have parentheses here, but within the parentheses, I have a whole lot going on. So after I look at my parentheses, I have to do my exponent. So 2 to the 8th power. Get your trusty dusty calculator. Unless you want to just write out 2 8 times and multiply in your head, that's fine. So you're going to get your trusty dusty calculator, and you're going to say, what is 2 to the 8th power? And 2 to the 8th power is 256. Okay. So now I'm going to rewrite with everything I know. S sub 8 equals 2 times 1 minus 256 divided by 1 minus 2. Only thing I changed here, ladies and gentlemen, is this 2 to the 8th power. I'm doing my PEMDAS. Okay. Now I can do my, I can simplify my numerator and simplify my denominator. So S sub 8 equals 2 times 1 minus 256 is negative 255 divided by 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. Okay. Now I can do my division. Negative 255 divided by negative 1 is just positive 255. So it becomes 2 times 255. Okay. And then 2 times 255 equals 510. So what this tells us is that if I add up the first 8 terms of this sequence, they would all add up to 510. Again, all I did was I found my common ratio by doing my test, my geometric test. Identify what I know. I know n is 8 because I'm trying to find the sum of the first 8 terms. A sub 1 is 2, and r I tested and found out is 2 as well. Plug in what you know. Use your PEMDAS. Use your PEMDAS to simplify it and get your answer. Let's do it again. So for this sequence, I know it's geometric, but I have to find my common ratio. Okay, I have to find my common ratio. So I'm going to do my test. A sub 2 divided by a sub 1. So I have 2/3 divided by 1. 2/3 divided by 1. Now you know 2/3 divided by 1, remember, when you're dividing by a fraction, you're just multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to just multiply by 1, which equals 2/3. Okay. Then I'm going to take my third term, a sub 3, and divide it by my second term, a sub 2. Remember, when you're dividing by fractions, you're really multiplying by the flip. Now, the reason why I didn't flip 1 is because the flip of 1 is 1. Okay, the flip of 1 is 1. Okay, so I'm going to take 4/9, and instead of dividing it by 2/3, I'm going to multiply it by 3/2. Okay, and then I'm going to multiply across. So I have 4 times 3 is 12. 9 times 2 is 18, which can be simplified, right? If I divide both of these by 6, I get 2/3. Okay, so as you can see, 2/3 is going to be my common ratio. Okay, you have to remember that when you're dividing by fractions, you're really multiplying by the flip. Okay, so you'll have to remember that, not just for geometric sequences, but in general, because you'll see it a lot of times in real life as well. Okay, so I know my common ratio is 2/3. I know my first term is 1, and I know that my n, I'm trying to find the sum of the first 8 terms, so n is 8. Okay, that's what we know. Okay, now we're going to take what we know and we're going to plug it into our sum formula. So S sub 8 equals the first term, which is 1, times 1 minus r, which is 2/3, raised to the n power, which is 8. So 2/3 raised to the 8th power, divided by 1 minus r, which is 2/3. Okay, all I plugged in was what I know. Okay, just plugged in what I know. Now I can simplify. First, I'm going to do my parentheses, and within the parentheses, I'm going to do my x. So I'm going to do my 2/3 raised to the 8th power. So now, when you do that, you're going to always put your fractions in parentheses. So it's parentheses 2/3 raised to the 8th power, just like that. And it's going to give you a decimal. Now, I know the decimal is big, but usually and often when I give problems, I never make the decimals too big. So just write out the decimal. Okay, just write out the decimal, and I'm going to write that out slowly. So now it's S sub 8 equals 1, and excuse this, I had to, I did it differently and then I decided to make a change. S sub 8 equals 1 times 1 minus, and my decimal was 0.03901844423. Okay, that's accurate. That's the accurate number. That's the number we're going to keep. All divided by 1 minus 2/3. Okay, just keep the decimal. I'll try to make it so it's not a decimal that's too complex. Okay, so now that I did my exponent, I can now simplify my numerator and denominator. So 1 minus this number. Now in my calculator, since I'm doing it with a graphing calculator, I'm just going to do 1 minus, okay, the answer, right? So in order to do the answer, what I did was 1 minus, and since this is the last answer, I did second, let me minimize this. Second answer. See how it says answer right here? So second and then this subtraction sign. And that's going to give me 9.6098155577. Okay? All I did just now was 1 minus this number. Now, if you don't have a graphing calculator, you can just do 1 minus this number. Like literally, right? Type in 1 minus this number in your calculator. Okay, so then that's just going to give us S sub 8 equals 1 times 0.9609815577 divided by 1 minus 2/3. Okay? And again, I'm just going to do 1 minus 2/3. 1 minus, parentheses again, 2/3 equals 0.333333. Continuing, okay? I know it's a lot of decimals, but decimals are numbers too, and we shouldn't be scared of them because we see them a lot in the real world, okay? Now, when I do this, 0.96098155577 divided by because remember, we're still doing our parentheses, 0.333333, continuing. I'm just going to type that in my calculator, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. That's going to give me 2, and I'm going to write it over here. S sub 8 equals 2.8829446673. This is our answer. And I know you're like, golly, this is a lot of numbers. We did the same thing we did over here. Just that this was a little bit more simpler because it wasn't decimals, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. And that makes sense because if you think about it, 2/3 can be written as a decimal. 4/9 can be written as a decimal. And if you keep on making decimals that are bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, this is what you're gonna get. Okay? That's what happens. Okay? All right, so this will be your answer. Again, I may or may not add one like this, but it's good for you to see an example like this, and excuse the scratchiness. You just write this part so that your notes are neater. All right, let's do another one. We have here, so I want you to really try to do this on your own. This is the you try. So 3 and 4, I want you to try to pause it and do it on your own using the 2 examples up top, okay? And then when you come back, we'll do it together. Don't cheat yourself by not trying to do them on your own. It's really, really, really simple once you can get your grasp of your steps. Okay, so pause it and try to do it on your own and come back. All right, now, number 3. We have 5, -15, and 45. Now, I could look at this and say that from 5 to -15 is multiplying by -3. And from -15 to 45, I'm multiplying by -3. Right? But let's do our test. So a sub 2 divided by a sub 1 equals -15 divided by 5, which is -3. And then a sub 3 divided by a sub 2 equals 45 divided by -15, which is, lo and behold, -3. So because -3 is a number we got at the same time, then we know our common ratio because it is a geometric sequence is -3. Now our first term is 5, no math needed there, and we're trying to find the 8th, the sum of the first 8 terms, so it's 8 is in. Okay? Now let's plug in what we know. S sub 8 equals the first term, which is 5, times 1 minus r, so 1 minus -3 to the 8th power. Okay, 1 minus -3 to the 8th power. Make sure you put in that -3. The negative, the 1 minus is always there. So the r can be anything. So it's -3 to the 8th power, all divided by 1 minus r, which is -3. Again, in orange is what I know, what I plugged in. Okay, I plugged in the 8 for n. Wherever I saw n, I plugged in 5 for a sub 1 and -3 for r. That's what I know. Now I can simplify, starting with my exponent. So it becomes a sub 8 equals 5 times 1 minus -3 to the 8th power. Let's put it in our calculators. parentheses, -3 to the 8th power. 6,561. That's a popular number. I saw that before. So 6,581. Okay, it's positive 6,581 divided by 1 minus -3. Now I can simplify this. I can simplify my numerator and denominator, right? Because we're still dealing with our parentheses, right? So 1 minus 6,581. So SWBAT equals 5 times 1 minus 6,581 is just basically negative 6,580. Okay, all divided by 1 minus -3, which is 4. Right? 1 minus -3 becomes 1 plus 3 because 2 negatives make a positive. You could also just put it in your calculator. Okay, you could put this in your calculator too. 1 minus 6,581 is negative 6,580. Now, still dealing with my parentheses, I'm going to simplify. Negative 6,580 divided by 4. And again, if you hear me clicking, it's just because I'm putting it in my calculator. So negative 6,580 divided by 4 is 1,645. Multiplied times 5. This equals positive, or I'll put it down here. S sub 8 equals 8,225. So what this is telling me is if I added up all the first 8 terms of this sequence, I would get 8,225. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, remember, first things first, test to find your common ratio because it's geometric. Plug in what you know, do PEMDAS. Exponents first, then simplify your numerator, simplify your denominator, then do your division, and then your multiplication. Okay. All right, now let's do it without. Let's do it without the chart. Okay, without the table. First things first, we have to do our test. So a sub 2 divided by a sub 1 equals 100 divided by 200, which is 1/2. Okay, and then we do a sub 3 divided by a sub 2, which is 50 divided by 100. If you put it in your calculator, you're going to get 0.5. You could do 0.5, right? Or half. So we see that they're the same. 0.5 and 1/2 is just decimal and fraction form. Same thing. So 0.50 is our common ratio. Our first term is 200, and our n is 8 here. All these were 8 because we're trying to find the sum of the first 8 terms. So now let's plug in what we know. Okay, S sub 8 equals the first term, okay, which is 200, times 1 minus r, 0.50 to the n power, which is 8, all divided by 1 minus 0.50. Okay. We plugged in 8 for n. We plugged in 200 for a sub 1. We plugged in 0.50 for r. And then we plugged in 8 for n. Okay? Everything in orange is what I knew, what I plugged in. Now let's do our PEMDAS. We got to deal with parentheses. First, we're going to deal with our exponent. So put everything in as a decimal. 0.5 raised to the 8th power gives us another long decimal, and we're going to put that in. Okay? So S sub 8 equals 200 times 1 minus 0.003 90625, all divided by 1 minus 0.50. Now we did our exponent, we can simplify our numerator and our denominator. S sub A equals 200. 1 minus 0.00390625. So we already have this as our answer in our graphing calculator. So we're going to do 1 minus this answer. So you got to go to second answer. That's going to give us 0.99609375. Okay, and divided by 1 minus 0.5, which is just 0.5, right? 1 minus 1/2 is 1/2. You could also put that in your calculator. Okay? All right. So now I have this decimal. We're going to divide these two. So it's going to be 200 times whatever this divided by this is. So I'm going to put that in my calculator as well. 0.99609 375 divided by 0.5 equals 1.9921875 times 200. So S sub A equals 398.4375. And again, that makes sense because if we keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, eventually it will become fractions, okay? So the first 8 terms, if I added them up of this sequence, it would be 398.4375. Okay. Again, numbers 2 and 4 were a little bit more complex because they had to deal with fractions. But, ladies and gentlemen, really, if you think about it, all you're doing is plugging in what you know and doing PEMDAS. Plugging in what you know and doing PEMDAS. Plugging in what you know and doing PEMDAS. Okay, always start with your exponent. Then simplify your numerator and denominator. And then multiply. That's it. So, for your practice, you're going to do the quiz review. And the quiz review is on both the sum of arithmetic and geometric sequences. So I give you the explicit formula for arithmetic to find the whatever term I asked you to find the sum of. I give you the sum formula for arithmetic, and I also give you the sum formula for geometric because you do not need the explicit formula for geometric. Okay, it's 4 problems. Okay, none of these problems deal with decimals. Actually, no, I think letter C does deal with this decimal, okay? So follow the steps. You have to first identify if they're arithmetic or geometric, guys. So you have to do your test. You have to do both tests for each one. Then when you identify with arithmetic or geometric, then you can decide what you know, okay? If you want to, you can do your little box over here and say if it's this one is, I believe, arithmetic, so then you would have your common difference, right? But also notice, okay, that I'm not asking you to find the same thing over and over again. This is find the sum of the first 23 terms. This one is find the sum of the first 6 terms. This one is find the sum of the first 19, and this one is find the sum of the first 25 terms. So what you're going to have to do is, if it's arithmetic, if I ask you to find the sum of the first 23, you're going to have to find a sub 23. Okay? You're going to have to find a sub 23. Right? If it's arithmetic, you have to find a sub 23. If it's geometric, then you just plug in what you know. Anyways, bring this to the Zoom class we're going to have tomorrow. That way, if you don't understand, then we can go over it together and you can have all your questions answered. Have a good day. Bye.